Okay, good afternoon, chairs, people, more chairs. Uh, Today, I'm not going to talk about environment. We're going to talk about other things because in the environment, it's not just butterflies and trees. There are people, and there are people of all kinds that we have in our environment that also needs to be talked about. Uh, Before I start talking about it, I was in Hyderabad yesterday. Uh, I heard something very, very strange. Uh, there's a neighbor that I had called Mr. Mathur, and Mr. Mathur and his son, they were actually going, they live in Delhi next to my house. They were going in a car, Mr. Mathur and his son, they were actually going in a car. There was a truck parked at DND, and their car actually went and rammed into that truck. Father died on the spot, son was rushed to the hospital, and in the hospital, doctor says, I cannot operate this boy. This boy is my son. And I didn't know what to make of it. Can you make anything out of the story that I told you just now? How many of you thought that it was the mother that was the doctor? And 50% of you did not think of that doctor to be the mother? Yes? Did you think it was the mother? You were looking at that person to be a male father, a male person in that sense. So many times that we've done this exercise, that I've asked people the same thing, unless you've heard this riddle before, you will think church ka father, grandfather, dodo father, char father. You all have seen a female doctor in your life, but the moment you think of a doctor, you start imagining a male person. Now, if we take a few steps back and look at mother, right? What comes to your mind when you think of mother? What comes to your mind when you think of mother? Love, care, affection, support, such a beautiful, soft woman, right? Sometimes food, sometimes a couple of other things. And when I say father, what would come to your mind? Strict, earning, right? Someone who guides the family. And in reality, is the mother who also guides the family, is the father who also loves you as much, if not more. But there is that stereotype that we actually have, which is in our system, and as women and men, both. So it's not as if men think that women are softer and men are stronger. Women sometimes themselves think, because of socialization, because of patriarchy, that they are actually softer people. So today what I'm going to talk about is the stereotype that needs to be busted, that needs to really not exist in the way it does currently. I started a small enterprise a couple of months ago, actually a year ago. There were these women that were around our office, and they said, well, you do a lot of work on environment, but what about people? And can we do some bit of, can there be something around employability? So he said, fine, do you want to learn computers, or do you want to do silais? Do you want to do some kadhai kaam? Because the moment you think of employability and livelihood, those are traditional thoughts that come to your mind. That let's train them into a particular thing. We said no. The idea is not just to train them on a particular thing and then make a mediocre out of them. Let's look at something that they already knew. And these were women who lived in the nearby slums, who worked as maids and servants in the households of South Delhi. So we said, what is a skill that you already have rather than you acquiring a new skill? They said, oh, well, we know how to cook. That's why we started an enterprise called Lunchbox 17. Lunchbox, because it's traditionally tiffin, khana, ghar ka khana. And 17 because that's the pin code where these women lived. Very interestingly, as in there was no fancy technology, it was a centralized kitchen where the food was prepared by these women, so ghar ka khana that they were making. And within 1 year, they were actually able to create and sell around 23,000 tiffins in and around South Delhi. These 8 women who said, well, we will take care of our own destiny. The reason 17, because the pin code, so that some other pin code, 10 women can stand up and say, oh, well, we want to run Lunchbox 23. That's how the journey was. And then we realized, me as an entrepreneur, and we thought that why should there be a centralized kitchen? Why can the kitchen not be decentralized? What about the kitchen that I have in my house? And why should the women who are poor, is it always so that women who are poor are the most disadvantaged? Is my mother really, really empowered a woman? And if you look at every statistics that you have around you, that women in rich societies, in rich families, middle class, South Delhi, perhaps has worst gender ratio or worst case of sexual violence or every other indicator that we think of. So in the name of culture, you are asked not to do many, many things. So you might be a graduate or a super graduate or a mega graduate or a postgraduate, but you're asked to stop because you are supposed to be the maryada of the family. And this is not just Delhi, it happens everywhere. So the first one who has to really compromise is the woman. So we said that fine, let's look at creating a system where my mother can also earn, and we launched a thing called Million Kitchen. Million Kitchen was about 3 things. Of course, Million Kitchen means million kitchens. Why one kitchen? Because it's a kitchen on the cloud. It's a decentralized kitchen where my kitchen in the house, which is underutilized, can be used. My mother, who actually knows how to cook and cooks amazing food, can be the main person driving it. And technology, using technology in a way that it is not just about Facebook. So if, you know, the funny example of technology that we keep using as my interaction with technology in late 90s was that you go to a cyber cafe and log in as cool dude 89, chatting with a baby doll 66, and then the first question that you asked, and this is our generation, of course, you guys are a little younger than, maybe a little younger than what I am, and that's how our web, our Facebook, our ASL was the first question that was there. So for us, Million Kitchen was about using technology in a very, very different way, creating a Tinder of food. So when my mom cooks amazing mutton curry, she can actually put that food there on the app, and anyone in that 3-kilometer, 5-kilometer radius who's actually looking for mutton curry that day can actually find it, click order, and get and receive that mutton curry. That meant that every kitchen, every woman, also the stereotype that is around cooking, by the way. If you ask an average woman, if there are 2 people in the house, a man and a woman, if someone has to have chai, who moves to the kitchen first? Women have to move it, because women are supposed to be good cooks. Women are supposed to be really good at cooking. And we as men, we have created that society, that misconception, which overpowers and allows women to be in the kitchen. So for us, our idea at Million Kitchen was not, of course, we don't agree to that. I think it's men who have created this exploitative system of, you know, forcing women to be in the kitchen. But if that society exists, how do we challenge it? How do we really bring in something more than just appreciation in cooking? So when my mom or your aunt cooks good food, what does she actually get in return? Acha tha. The food was good and nothing else. Is there a market for good food? Yes, there is a market for good food. Is there a market for home food? Yes, there could be a market for home food, but that market was never utilized. As in, there are a few startups that are actually working on home food, and our idea is that every woman across, you know, class lines, disadvantaged, advantaged, can perhaps be an entrepreneur. And very interestingly, in 3 months of our operation, we have around 150 women who actually are part of the platform. On an average, most of them earn around 20 to 25,000 rupees. Their husbands, perhaps some of their husbands earn 2.5 to 5 lakh rupees a month, but for them, that 25,000 rupees is a big amount. They have started spending that money on themselves. Earlier, they had to ask for that money. So they were the finance minister of the house. In a very joking way, if you ask a husband, they'll say, oh, well, yeah, she runs the house. But she runs the house based on the money that is provided to her. She did not have an identity, and that is something that has started happening. You'll be surprised to know that at least out of these 70, 80, 150, and then most days active, around 5 to 7 of these women from very good families, they didn't even have a bank account. They did not have a bank account when their sons went to Harvard and husbands drove an Audi. And they were all English-speaking, South Delhi, living, Fab India, wearing, Marks and Spencer generation that we are talking about. And that's what the reality was. So for us, this entire project of Million Kitchen is about understanding something very fundamental called food, and therefore understanding that food, what you eat is how you behave, understanding who is cooking that food. So of course, looking at home food primarily, and women in and food as a stereotype, the stereotype that is associated with women and stereotype that is associated with women cooking, that needs to be devastated, that needs to be fractured, that needs to be disrupted in many ways. Now for us, as in that is one part of the enterprise, right now we are in doing it in Delhi. We are actually going to Pakistan in December, because this is not just a South Delhi phenomena that we're talking about. This entire issues of exploitation or underutilization or overexploitation of women in their kitchen is a global story anywhere in the world, and more so in developing countries. It's a phenomena. Now, as a journey as an entrepreneur, that's also very, very important. That, you know, what does it actually take for someone like me or many people like us to really delve into these things? It's been quite challenging because it's actually a business, right? So it might be a social business, but there is investment that is involved. Now, where do you draw a line where your bottom line is not just your returns, but also some kind of a social impact? And that is where we actually struggle. So when you go to an investor, or the difference that I had with some of my own co-founders earlier was that for them, it was a profit-making company completely driven by tech. For me, it was a tech which was enabling an empowerment process, but fundamentally it was an empowerment process. Fundamentally, it was a food company. Fundamentally, it was about that my mother in the kitchen who perhaps earns, rather than the app that I use or the web ... that I use. So it, of course, that enables someone to find and discover the food. So that's the other challenge that is there in the ecosystem right now, that what do you value more? You all are in the technology university right now. When you develop an app or a product, what do you think of? You think of the product, or do you look at people who are selling the product, or people who are going to use the product? At the end of the day, all three matters, but for you, what's your driving force? Can there be a social story in every story that we create? Or to create a social story, you have to create a social product? No. Million Kitchen is creating a social story, but it not necessarily is a social product in that sense. Every product that you make needs to really understand that disparities around the world, injustice around the world, ecological disaster around the world will only be resolved when all these issues are mainstreamed. It cannot be forced upon somebody else's responsibility that yes, Vimlendu is a social worker and therefore he should be taking care of all the trees. I will be actually taking care of all the money-making businesses that I can perhaps run. And that thing, I think, as technologists, as young generation, we need to break, and that is what my entire example of Million Kitchen is. We want innovation in our lives, we want technology in our lives, but we also want people around these innovations and technology, and that is something that people like yourself need to drive soon enough, quickly enough. We don't have much time. There will be apps every second day. You guys churn apps, but what is that app for is extremely important to us, not from an investor point of view, that whether you'll be able to raise a Series A and a Series B and a Series C, but who does it actually impact at the end of the day? Thank you very much.